Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for this edition of We Need a Little Christmas. My name is Leanne Stair, and I hope to bring you a bit of Christmas cheer as I share with you some of the stories behind the traditions, songs, and movies of the holiday season. Today we're going to look at another favorite carol, the First Noel. Now, the First Noel is one of the oldest Christmas carols still sung today. It first appeared in print in 1833, but the song goes back at least 300 years prior to that. Now, the exact time and place is doubted, as both France and England claim it as part of their heritage. The spelling of Noel would seem to indicate a French connection, though there seems to be more evidence pointing to this carol's migrating from Britain to France rather than the other way around. What cannot be doubted is the faith and spirit of the song's writer. Their Christian witness comes alive each time the carol is sung. Now, I'm going to interrupt myself here because the first time I attended a TSO, Trans-Siberian Orchestra concert, I didn't know what to expect. I had heard a few of their songs on the radio and decided to go with a friend. We didn't know what we were in for. Well, that night, the concert opened with this song wailing on a guitar. My eyes started to tear up as the message of Christmas was shared with thousands of people who spent a lot of money to buy tickets and go to this secular concert. I was just overwhelmed that the Christian message was being communicated. All right, now back to our story. Just as there are two different points of view as to where this carol was first written, there are also two different ways of spelling the carol's title. In England, and sometimes in America, the spelling of Noel is N-O-E-L and is altered, and the carol is known as the First Noel, N-O-W-E-L-L. In France, it is always spelled N-O-E-L. What Noel or Noel means in both languages is the same, a joyful shout expressing the exhilaration at the birth of Christ. The First Noel is one of the few surviving early Christmas standards that can be called a folk song. Whoever was responsible for penning this carol was obviously incredibly enthusiastic about Christmas and fully understood the wonder of Christ's birth, but didn't have a full grasp of the scriptures that told the story of that birth. You see, during the Middle Ages, this was often the rule rather than the exception. When the First Noel was written, there were very few Bibles in circulation. Well, most were either in churches or monasteries and were in Latin. Common people rarely saw a Bible in person, and even if they had, they wouldn't have been able to read it. This was probably the case with the composer of this carol. The writer drew from the stories that had been told about the events of Christ's birth. Most of it is accurate, but it errs when depicting that the shepherds were following the star to Christ's birthplace. Now, the Bible only states that the wise men followed the star. But nevertheless, the spirit found in the First Noel more than makes up for this lack of knowledge. During the Middle Ages, English peasants had adopted the Viking custom of Yule logs. Each winter, a family would go out into the woods, cut down a huge tree, drag it back home, cut away its branches, and hollow out its core. Then they filled the hole with oils, spices, and other sweet-smelling ingredients and set the log in the fireplace. Now, a daughter or wife would light the fire with a splinter left over from last year's log. Now, when those who embraced the custom became Christians, they adapted the Yule log to Christmas. Eventually, the timber came to symbolize the wood of the cross, and the sweet packing to represent the beautiful life of Christ that was offered to all. The log was brought into the home on Christmas Eve, and it was lit. It was hoped that the log would burn for the entire 12 days of Christmas. Its embers then dying out on January 6th, the day they celebrate the wise men arriving with their gifts for the Jesus. If it had lasted that long, it was a sign that the household was blessed. In England, the First Noel was sung each year by many peasants as they lit the Yule log. Therefore, this became the song that started the entire Christmas season. Now, especially for children, this carol means the beginning of the most wonderful time of the year. Though its words were never written down, the First Noel survived through this tradition. For the first 300 years of its existence, the First Noel was not part of any religious services. You see, the clergy disdained these folk carols, and they truly became the holiday voice of the people. They related the joy of Christmas, the wonder of God sending a son to save every man and woman, no matter their station in life. These songs became part of a family tradition. Many of the holiday's most beloved songs would have been lost if common folk had not passed them down from generation to generation. Both the First Noel and the Yule log tradition found their way to France around the 15th century. Now, supposedly, the song was introduced to the French people by British minstrels. The common people of France also embraced the music and message of the song, and they gave it their own twist. Children in this country often sang it as a round. The First Noel was published in 1833 by William Sandys, a lawyer by trade who loved music and spent his spare time collecting both French and English folk songs. Eventually, the Church of England began to use new songs during services, and the First Noel found universal acclaim. Today, this song remains one of the most loved carols of all time. And you might wonder why this one has survived when thousands of others have not. Well, most likely it's because the writer brought a rare, jubilant spirit to the song. If you've sung the First Noel, you have a sense that the composer was very excited about the story they were sharing. While the tradition of the Yule log has all but died, the message of the First Noel still burns brightly. Merry Christmas to you today and every day.